So in what we're going to do today, we're going to be challenging a lot of the conventional wisdom that you've learned about how we build successful products. And we need to take this radical approach in building world-changing products. And I want to start off by explaining why we need this radical approach. But first, I think we need to start with understanding our mantras for just how we build products today. You know, what we've learned is the way to build products is that you have to fail fast, learn fast. Maybe you have to move fast and break things. But above all, and most importantly, we've learned that you have to just be iterating really quickly. Right. And we've learned that if we do these three things just right, then we stand to build, successful products and make lots of money. What's happened over the last decade, right, is that we've gotten really good at using lean startup. We've become increasingly agile. I mean, these methodologies have just become so ubiquitous. But it's become to the point that we over-rely on iteration. And the extent to which we over-rely on iteration really hit me at a meeting where an executive said, I know that we don't have the right designer on the team right now, but that'll just mean a few more iterations, but eventually we'll get there. The assumption has become that if you just iterate long enough, that you're going to build world-changing products. And that is the fundamental flaw in our mantras for how we do innovation and how we build products. This idea that if you just iterate long enough, you build world-changing products, that is the fundamental flaw. Because the reality is, right, lean and agile, they give you the equivalent of a fast car. Now, having a Ferrari or a McLaren, that is great, absolutely wonderful to have a fast car. But the reality is, right, we continue to just iterate and optimize for this fast car. We've learned how to be more agile, how to have a higher sprint velocity. We've gotten, from our sports car to the top of the line Ferrari. But the problem is when you step back, you realize, well, a fast car is honestly only useful when you know where you're going. And that's been where we haven't invested our effort. Over the last decade, we've really invested all of our effort in having this fast car. What hasn't kept pace is our ability to set the destination and know where we're going. So meaning our ability to have a really clear vision and strategy so that we know where we're going and how to navigate to it, that hasn't kept pace. And so we keep iterating in a way that's not driven by a clear vision and strategy. So what happens? The result is, and the breakdown that we see is twofold. The first is that we see product diseases. And, I call product diseases this pattern of mistakes that I've been seeing over the last 20 years. And I've caught a lot of these product diseases myself. So in fact, I'll share from these examples. The second is, in addition to these product diseases, we also see that our products really inflict collateral damage on society. And I also want to spend some time talking about the second effect of this collateral damage on society. But let's start with product diseases, right? Because they're so common. And I've worked in so many industries at this point, from broadcast, media and entertainment, telecom, government, even wine. And I've seen these product diseases regardless of the size of company, all the way from startups to multinationals. So let's do a checkup and tell me if you've seen these product diseases, and feel free to share your experience in chat. So this first disease is strategic swelling. Right? This is where your product starts out really well, and then a customer has an idea for you. If you just add this one feature, I could also use this product to do blah, this new use case. Another customer comes along and they also have a great idea for you on what else your product could do. And so pretty much your product starts to grow and grow and swell to the point where, it would be making coffee for you if you just ask nicely. And that's when you've hit strategic swelling, when your product is just so bloated that you don't recognize it anymore, right? Anyone has seen strategic swelling? Feel free to share in chat. This next one, right, is obsessive sales disorder. And I have absolutely contributed to this disease myself, right? This disease happens when your salesperson comes to you with a glimmer in their eye. They're all excited and they say to you, if you just add this one custom feature, we can win this mega client. And it sounds mostly harmless. And so we say, yes, let's do it. And pretty much by the end of the year, you're sitting with a stack of contracts and your entire roadmap is driven by all the things that you have to make good on, right? Obsessive sales disorder is what happens when we continue to just trade off short-term gains and work towards those short-term gains and give up on the vision. This next disease is Narcissus Complex. This is what happens when we're so focused inwards on our own goals, what we think the customer needs, as opposed to really thinking about the customer. It gets to a point where we get disconnected from the customer and what they actually need. And I think the worst case of Narcissus Complex that I've come across is where an executive of a group of hospitals said, you know, for us to be successful, we need patients to come back often. And when you meditate on that for a second, right, you realize, wow, they've really gotten disconnected from what this means for patients, that it means that patients have to keep getting sick all the time. And I'll share one last disease, which is hypermetricemia, because it is so common at this point. We all know that it's important to be data-driven, measure everything, test everything. We've gotten obsessed with A/B testing, and that is all wonderful, right? But often the problem with hypermetricemia is that we get obsessed with metrics and analytics without thinking about whether these are even the right things to measure in the first place. And so very often we realize that we're optimizing for metrics, but in the end, we realize that our product isn't fundamentally better in any way, although we've hit all sorts of metrics and moved numbers up and to the right. So all of these diseases, they're absolutely curable. But these diseases make good products go bad when we're just iterating without a really clear vision and strategy that's driving these iterations. But the other problem that I talked about, right, is in addition to these product diseases, what happens when our product is iteration-led as opposed to being driven by a clear vision is that our products start to create collateral damage to society. And I've started to call this collateral damage to society digital pollution, right? Because very similar to environmental pollution, just as the industrial boom led to environmental pollution, our carefree growth in the digital era has led to digital pollution. And I want to give you an example of digital pollution from my own personal life, right? Because very often if I talk about digital pollution, we're immediately going to think about the big tech companies. We're going to think about Facebook, Google, etc. And yes, just like the oil giants, there are some big polluters, the big techs. But every one of us is building products, and each of our products actually end up contributing to digital pollution. So I want to give you just some points to think about when you think about your product and think about how are you contributing to digital pollution, right? And the example I want to share with you is this game called Prodigy. So my son, when he was 7 years old, came home and he was really excited to play this math game. So he had been introduced to this math game as an advanced student in class. And, you know, it turned out that my daughter had been introduced to the same math game and she hated it, whereas my son loved it. And so I look at this game and then it hits me right off the bat, like, of course, I understand why my son loves it and my daughter hates it. The way this game works is that you have these Pokemon characters that are battling each other, and you have to answer a math question right to be able to attack your opponent. And so, you know, of course, as a product person, this takes me down a rabbit hole. I'm wondering, well, what was this company thinking when they came up with this game, right? Were they thinking about how it affects the different genders? And of course, I look at their marketing video and here's what it looks like. The boys on this video were going, yes, and pumping fists. The girls on this video were looking like quite sullen. So then I asked my kids, so what do you guys think? I didn't show them this marketing video. I asked my kids, what do you think? Is this targeted at boys or girls? And my son goes, well, boys, of course. And my daughter, to which responded with biting sarcasm, she said, but don't worry, the next version will be for girls and it'll have Disney princesses that invite you to tea if you get the answer right. And this was when my daughter was 10 years old, right? But I'll let you meditate on that for a second. And what you realize is that hers is a scathing criticism of how we build products. We often optimize for user engagement, for metrics, that disease of hypermetricemia, without thinking about how it's affecting society. If we look at Prodigy, their website says that they have over 50 million users, right? Now, just let's say half of those are girls, so 25 million. And let's just say less than half of those girls think that their that the boys in class are better at math than they are. That's, about, let's say 10 million girls who think that maybe they shouldn't go into a STEM career. That is collateral damage to society. So our approach when we're building products that are just focused on iteration without a clear vision and strategy for the change we bring about, they create product diseases and they create digital pollution. And this is why we need something different. So why isn't lean and agile enough to get us out of trouble? It's because lean and agile give us speed and execution, right? But speed can look like this, where we're all moving in different directions, where we don't have a clear vision and strategy. And so direction matters. And this is where in high school physics, you know that speed plus direction is velocity. And that's what you need. You want velocity, not just speed. And so what is radical product thinking? It's a methodology for building world-changing products that create the change that you want to bring about. And it gives organizations a very systematic step-by-step process for how do you build those world-changing products. In the radical product thinking way, it means starting with a really clear vision for the change you want to bring about, translating that into a strategy, then into a set of priorities, then into execution and measurement, and finally into the culture that you want to engineer to be able to drive this sort of innovation. In the radical product thinking way, you can very systematically engineer the change. And the entire toolkit is designed so that you can communicate your rationale with your team and within your organization, so that you can bring people with you on the journey. Now, I realize that a lot of the words that I've used, right, you've heard those words before. For instance, everyone knows, oh, of course I need a vision, right? Duh. And we all know that we need a strategy. But I want to really illustrate for you what I mean by a vision and a strategy, because in the radical product thinking way, I mean something very different. And I first want us to unlearn everything that we've learned about what is a good vision. A good vision is not a BHAG. It is not something that has to be heroic or big. It's not a short slogan. Because let me give you an example of what happens when you have that sort of a BHAG. Here's an example of a vision statement that is a broad, big, aspirational vision. Traditionally, we've learned that this is a good vision, right? So it reads, contributing to human progress by empowering people to express themselves. Now, when you have a vision like this, if I hold up any feature against this, the answer to this is yes, let's do it. Because I'll give you an example. This could be the vision statement for my kid's piano teacher. She is empowering my kids to express themselves and therefore contributing to human progress. This could also be the vision statement for a dance studio, for a company making Post-its, because Post-its are empowering us to express ourselves. Anything goes when you have a vision this broad. And that's why this vision is not useful as a North Star. So what should you do instead, right? So here's what a good vision does look like. It should answer the who, what, why, when, and how questions, right? So the first is, whose world are you trying to change? It can't just be all consumers or all businesses, right? That's just way too broad. Whose world specifically are you trying to change? What does that world look like? Meaning, what exactly is the problem? Why does it need changing? This is probably the most important question, because maybe it doesn't need changing. And let's be honest about it. Then we ask, when will you know that you've arrived? Meaning, what does the world look like when you can say mission accomplished? And finally, this is where you can talk about your product or your approach. How are you going to change it for them? So in the radical product thinking way, I use this fill in the blank statement, which makes it really easy to write such a vision statement, right? This helps you focus on the profound questions of who, what, why, when, and how, rather than just focusing on wordsmithing. So here's what this statement would sound like for a startup I had. I founded it in 2011, sold it in 2014. It would read like this. Today, when amateur wine drinkers want to find wines that they're likely to like, they have to find attractive looking wine bottles or wines that are on sale. This is unacceptable because it leads to so many disappointments, and it's hard to learn about wine this way. We envision a world where finding wines you like is as easy as finding movies you like on Netflix. We're bringing about a world through a recommendations algorithm that matches wines to your taste, and an operational setup that delivers these wines to your door. Now, this is a radical vision because I had not told you anything about my startup, but at the end of this, you knew exactly what we were doing and why we were doing it. So now that you've learned about what a good vision is, I want to take a few minutes to just spread our thinking on product, right? Because when you apply this radical product thinking way and systematically translate vision into action, anything can be your product. Your product is your mechanism to create change in the world. And so the example I want to use to illustrate this point is the country of Singapore as a radical product. Singapore, if you think about where they started, right, in the 1950s, it was this poor, struggling island where the majority didn't even have running water or sanitation. In fact, this is an iconic picture of Singapore from the 1950s of a man carrying night soil, and I leave that to your wonderful imaginations to think of what that is. But let's just say that from that poor, struggling island without sanitation to where Singapore is, it was because of a radical vision. That was the start of it, right? The first Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, when Singapore became independent, it was because they split from Malaysia after a failed merger. And when it became independent, nobody thought that Singapore could actually survive as an independent country. In fact, even the first Prime Minister in the first press conference, he got emotional saying, all my life, I thought Singapore's place in the world was with Malaysia. Singapore didn't even have natural resources, not even drinking water. They were dependent, 70% of their drinking water came from Malaysia, right? But Lee Kuan Yew had a vision. He said, the change he wanted to bring about was a better life for Singaporeans. His mechanism was the country of Singapore. He wanted to design Singapore like his vehicle to bring about the change he wanted to see. He talked about it as producing a first world oasis in a third world region. He talked about it as a platform to explore the region. He talked about it like a product, right? But defining your vision is only the first step in engineering your product and engineering change. So there had to be a strategy. In the radical product thinking way, your strategy has to be radical, and the mnemonic is RDCL. Which is real pain points. In this case, you have to ask, in the case of Singapore, what do businesses need in such an oasis? What's that pain point? The design defines our solution for the pain point. Capabilities means asking the question, what's the secret sauce, the special sauce that enables the solution? And then finally, logistics is our business model. How do we support and enforce this plan, right? So I'll just go through one line of this. For businesses coming from the West, right, Singapore had to make it really easy for these businesses to be able to communicate. In terms of the design, this meant that the official language had to be English. But think about so many countries that went into civil war when there was a lot of ethnic diversity and one language was picked over others. It wasn't, easy. They had to have some capabilities to be able to power this design. In terms of capabilities, Singapore had to do some language education, get people to buy into this idea of why English needed to be the business language. And so even today, Singapore respects mother tongue languages, which are Chinese, Tamil, Malay, and English just happens to be the business language. And then finally, in terms of logistics, they had to fund all of this education, the infrastructure build out with loans, etc. That was part of their business model. Now, even when you have a wonderful vision and strategy, prioritization is where things go crazy, right? People forget about your vision and strategy when they're making decisions. And that's why you need this radical product thinking approach for balancing your vision against the reality of your everyday needs. So vision is your long-term and survival is your short-term, right? So things that are good for vision and survival, of course, those are ideal. But if you always focus on ideal, that's just being short-term driven still. So sometimes you have to actually invest in the vision. This is where you're doing something that's good for the vision, but maybe it's not helping you in the short term. So for example, if you are refactoring code for 3 months, you're investing in the vision. The opposite of investing in the vision is when you're taking on vision debt. This is when it's good for the short term. For example, when you want to win that deal by building a custom feature that's good for the short term, it's helping you survive, but it's not good for your long-term vision. So the more vision debt you build, the more you're taking on, you're heading towards obsessive sales disorder. And so the right set of priorities balances these quadrants. So let's see how Singapore did it, right? They declared independence, and that was investing in the vision. But declaring independence wasn't enough, right? You have to do things in the other quadrants. They had to build alliances with other countries so they could survive. They had to create an army, which wasn't necessarily creating a better vision or better world for Singaporeans, but it was helping them survive. That was a little bit of vision debt. And then they did a bunch of stuff in the upper quadrants of being good vision fits. I'll talk about creating access to drinking water. You know, they very systematically planned access to drinking water. And today, Singapore gets 70% of its drinking water from its own innovations. And it's on track for being fully self-sufficient in terms of drinking water. Singapore was designed as a radical product, very systematically translating that vision into their everyday actions. And so how can you plug in radical product thinking into what you're doing today? If you're using lean and agile for execution, great, keep doing that, right? But think about your vision and strategy first, and think about your execution as a hypothesis-driven approach for proving out your vision and strategy. And so communicate your vision and strategy using radical product thinking, and then you can execute in this feedback-driven, iterative manner, driven by this really clear vision and strategy. And this is how you can really systematically engineer change through your product and communicate it with your whole team and bring people with you on the journey. And so finally, if you'd like to learn more, you can get the Radical Product Thinking book. It's on bookshelves. You can get it from Amazon, Book Depository if you're in Europe or international. You can also join the mailing list to be able to get the free toolkit from radicalproduct.com. And finally, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn as well if you have questions and if I can't get to those in these next few minutes. And with that, I'd love to hear your questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was very inspiring. There are 7 minutes left, so we can answer your questions. I have the first one in the YouTube. So when recruiting with a product team, what are good questions to ask to spot any red flags around these frameworks? Maybe, I believe that was concerning the diseases that you mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah, I think the first thing is, right, it's really important to have an open discussion about diseases. And as a team, identify which diseases are you running into. So in the book, I talk about 7 diseases. I've mentioned 4 here, but there are a few more. But talk about diseases to see, you know, which diseases are you seeing in your organization or in your team. And that makes for a strong foundation for why do you need a radical approach? Why do you need to do something differently? It's always hard to get momentum for change. And so what sparks that momentum is identifying what is the problem. So start with a very open discussion of product diseases. I often do this even as a book club, like, you know, talk about these diseases by reading about it in the book, for example, and it starts that conversation for what's going wrong.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The next question is from me regarding the you told that this framework works when you need to, I don't know, change how people, for example, choose wine or something like that, right? So what if the product exists in the market that is quite mature? There are a lot of other players there. So does your framework works in that situation? Because people are used to, for example, buying things on Amazon, and I believe that they don't want anything to be changed. Can we use the radical product thinking framework to create a vision for our product?
So this way of thinking, right, and starting with a vision, that is really important. And that is the way of thinking that you can apply anywhere. So let's take this example of Amazon. If you're trying to build something that competes with Amazon, well, you still have to answer these questions of who, what, why, when, and how, right? Whose world are you trying to change? What problem are you solving that's already not being solved by Amazon? What are people doing today to solve that problem? Why does that world need changing? Because honestly, if Amazon is doing it so well, maybe there's absolutely no reason to build this competing product. So those are still the same questions we have to go through answering. If we don't have clear answers to the who, what, why, when, and how questions, we have no business actually building that product. And so whether it's a mature product or something you're building from scratch, very often the misalignments that we have in our team is because we all have different answers to the who, what, why, when, and how. So even in mature products and mature teams, I use this on a regular basis. I talk about this vision on a yearly basis at a minimum, because fundamentally our markets are never staying the same. Things keep changing in the market, and it's important to be able to realign as a team to see, where are we aligned on this who, what, why, when, how questions? Where do we differ on our answers? And so you do this as a group exercise. I think in the previous talk, Sean was saying, we should not be, it's not just the CEO who creates the vision. And that's exactly right. It has to be the whole team that has a shared vision. And that is important, whether you have a mature product or you're building something from scratch.
Yes, but regarding the vision in the mature product, so for example, you have a market and you have an Amazon competitor, right? So, and you already exist, but there are still people that are got used to buying from Amazon. So Amazon solves their problem. We're also, for example, solving their problem. How to define a vision further. I mean, you're not shutting down your business, right? Just because Amazon solves the problem. You're already existing and you have your market share. Maybe it's small, but still. So in that case, what should we do?
But the answer still comes down to, right, what is the why behind what you're doing? It's not to say you should shut down the business, but what is the clear why that you're solving that Amazon is not solving? Maybe, you're specializing in a certain type of product. Amazon's search results really suck, and you're providing a much better search approach. There has to be something that you're solving. This answer of why is the status quo completely unacceptable is a really important question to answer in the vision. And whether it's a mature product or not, you have to be able to create a clear answer to that question. And that goes to, whether you're trying to get investment or trying to launch a product and find product market fit. If you're not finding product market fit, often it's because there isn't a clear reason for why this product is different from, or what need it solves that someone else is not solving. So that's why I'm saying that the who, what, why, when, how questions really still need to be solved. It may be a smaller market share, right? But maybe it's because you're addressing the needs of a different type of user. Maybe it's, for example, the Amazon for construction companies where they're trying to find, bathroom accessories, right? But what exactly is it that you're solving? It's for a specific group of people that you're solving the problem. Why is the problem not solved for them? And why is the status quo unacceptable? Those are the key questions that define your vision for whatever your product is in a mature market or a new market.
Okay, got it. Thank you. So the framework works in both ways, actually. That's what I got from your answer. All right, so the timing is up. Thank you very much, Radhika.
Thanks so much.